we say to America is be true to what you said on paper. If I lived in China or even Russia or any totalitarian country, maybe I could understand some of these illegal injunctions. Maybe I could understand the denial of certain basic First Amendment privileges because they haven't committed themselves to that over there. But somewhere I read of the freedom of assembly. Somewhere I read of the freedom of speech. Somewhere I read of the freedom of press. Somewhere I read that the greatness of America is the right to protest for right.
The right to protest for rights. Well said. Good to be with you. I'm Katie Tur. That was Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. on April 3rd, 1968, a day before a single shot rang out at the Lorraine Motel in Memphis, Tennessee, ending his life. He was there to help striking sanitation workers get better working conditions, criticizing the city of Memphis for getting a federal injunction to stop workers from continuing to protest. Today on MLK Day, we remember that legacy. But we also remember the challenges he faced on his journey to bend the arc of moral justice, the arc of the moral universe toward justice, That includes targeted persecution by then FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover, who built his career promising Americans that he would protect them from gangsters, communists, and deviants. Hoover believed King was one of them, a radical threat to America that needed to be neutralized. And Hoover was ready to use lots of the FBI's tools to take him down. On October 1963, U.S. Attorney General Robert F. Kennedy approved the FBI's request to wiretap MLK Jr.'s telephones. They bugged his homes. They bugged his office, his friends, his associates. They accused him of being a communist, a moral degenerate. They leaked seedy private recordings to the press that refused to print the material. Surveillance that ultimately continued until his death. In 1976, a congressional investigation described the FBI's campaign against King as one of the most abusive of all FBI programs. But King was not alone. Hundreds of thousands of Americans were also unlawfully spied on and harassed by FBI agents because of their political or religious views, a fact uncovered by the Church Committee, which found decades of bipartisan abuses of power. Abuses of power that came to a head under President Richard Nixon, who used the IRS to target political enemies. After his resignation, the post-Watergate era ushered in a string of reforms, we've been talking about them a lot, that were meant to strengthen the independence of the Department of Justice, the FBI, and a number of other agencies. Reforms that are being rolled back by Donald Trump and his allies today. So what does that functionally mean for all of us? What does Donald Trump's version of submission and retribution, getting everyone in line, mean for anybody who wants to speak up, to use that right to protest? Joining us, New York Times chief White House correspondent and MS Now contributor Peter Baker, New York Times opinion columnist David French, immigration attorney and former president of the American Immigration Lawyers Association, Alan Orr, joins us as well. All right, I'm going to start this off, guys, by playing Todd Blanche on Sunday on Fox News.
Is the FBI conducting an investigation into that agent, into the shooting? What can you tell us about that? Will it be made public?
Look, what happened on that day has been reviewed by millions and millions of Americans because it was recorded on phones when it happened. Okay, the civil rights, the Department of Justice, our civil rights unit, we don't just go out and investigate every time an officer is forced to defend himself against somebody or putting his life in danger. We never do. We investigate when it's appropriate to investigate, and that is not the case here.
Okay, so I'm bringing this in because what we're talking about is a woman who was protesting ICE, honking her horn. She was shot and killed by an ICE agent. He says he was acting in self-defense. The video is disputed, obviously, with a lot of people coming on the side of the officer was actually not ultimately in harm's way. Regardless, it's disputed. The fact that Todd Blanche is saying that there's no investigation necessary, David, I'm having a hard time accepting that.
You should be having a hard time accepting that because, you know, the giveaway here that this is not a serious effort to look at the actual facts is when he says things like, well, millions of Americans saw the video. I'm sorry, the legal standard for analyzing whether a shooting was lawful or not, violated the constitutional rights of Renee Good or not, is based on a totality of the circumstances inquiry, not just a moment of threat inquiry. And even there, that inquiry would show that he looks, by all appearances, that he was already outside of the vehicle's path before he fired the first shot. These are things that would be resolved in an investigation, along with what is his training? Was he violating his training? Was this officer created danger when he walked in front of the vehicle as she was trying to leave? These are all questions that are answered in investigations that you can't answer just by looking at some cell phone video. This is not how an investigation is done. And what's important for people to realize is he knows this. This is not an inexperienced attorney. He knows very well this is exactly the kind of circumstance in which a rigorous DOJ investigation would be incredibly valuable. They're just not doing it.
So am I taking it too far to ask if that is just an admission from the administration that their agents, their federal officers, can do whatever they want, can just do whatever they want? When J.D. Vance said they have absolute immunity, is that them saying, get in our way, and if we kill you, not our problem?
Well, I mean, if you're looking at the totality, let's go back to totality of other circumstances, including the January 6th pardons, including many other pardons from Trump. We're looking at a pattern, and the pattern is if you are a Trump ally, if you're doing what Trump asks, then the law doesn't apply to you. If you're a Trump enemy, a Trump opponent, or even if he just perceives you as an opponent, then he's going to wield the full power of the government against you, often in lawless ways. This is a pattern from day one, and I think it's a mistake to just look at this one shooting and just look at this one shooting in isolation. We have to look at this in context, and the context is very clear. It's impunity for his allies, and it is punishment for his opponents.
So, Alan, when I see the videos that are coming out from Minneapolis, from all over the country, frankly, and have been coming out now for about a year, of ICE agents, Border Patrol agents getting really physical with protesters or physical with detainees or physical with bystanders, breaking car windows. Is that normal? Is that the protesters and the detainees and the bystanders all getting in the way, impeding law enforcement? Am I seeing this wrong? Am I not seeing it as the administration says I should be seeing it, which is that they're trying to do their jobs. They're trying to deport people who should not be here, who should not be here. They're illegal. And these are all people getting in the way, and but for them, everything would be fine.
Yeah, so I think in historical context, we've been able to remove people without this type of violence in the past. So that's A, to sort of start it off with. And I think you can't deny what your eyes are showing you. Even though the secretary was on the television this weekend saying that they didn't really need the court ruling to make a decision to not use pepper spray on individuals, you know, I can't believe what she's saying because I see what they're doing every day. And the video evidence is the record. And the fact that they're so harpered against not having video evidence anymore shows you what the problem is. So it is not normal. It is not required. And even if the individuals are undocumented in the country, we do not have to remove people in this such way. And why do we say they're getting in the way when it is the agitation from the federal government that is causing these problems? No one, almost in any of the videos, is saying you can't remove anyone. Even I'm not saying you can't remove anyone. We're saying the way and the process under the Constitution and the laws are what's important to follow.
So what do you advise people, given the threats that they're facing now to protest, given that a woman was shot and killed, given that they're being pepper sprayed in the face, they're being physically taken from their cars, they're being injured, in some cases detained unlawfully? How do you advise people to practice this right? As MLK put it, the greatness of America is the right to protest for right.
Right. I think that's an important conversation to have today. And I think that there's going to be different levels for people to engage themselves. And some people, like Dr. King, were willing to give their life for the ultimate struggles of the community, and which he did. And so in some cases, you should not hamper the individuals from carrying out their forces. And videotaping individuals from a distance is not a problem. You can record them. There is no law that says you cannot record them. You should be a reasonable distance away. And if they instruct you to move away, continue to record and move away in that instance. But it is our right under the Constitution to protest. And this sort of conversation around protesting not being American isn't consistent with the history of our country or consistent with the teachings of Dr. King. His last book was on community or chaos, and this chaos, this fear-driven community that we're doing in Minnesota and Minneapolis is exactly what will drive us to our end. Rather than trying to neutralize, sending more officers to this place does not solve the problem. It just exacerbates it.
I wonder, Peter, what does the administration see out there in the public? Because the polling numbers have gone down. The support for immigration enforcement in the interior is not there. Karl Rove was on, I think it was on Fox the other day, saying that Republicans in Texas are now endangered by these scenes that we're witnessing for immigration enforcement, that they might lose Hispanics, which is the demographic that helped Donald Trump win the White House and helped Republicans across the state of Texas. So, I'm just wondering, is the White House seeing different numbers? Do they believe that this is all going well, or do they just not care? What's the word?
Well, I think there are some people who do find these images troubling and politically hazardous, no question about it. Even in that interview that Susie Wiles gave to Chris Whipple in Vanity Fair that was published a few weeks ago, she said that we ought to look at these deportations a little more carefully, that there have been mistakes made. This is prior to Renee Good, prior to some of the more violent street scenes we've been seeing. But even then, she thought that there was a concern over how this was coming across the American public. Look, the polls indicate Americans wanted the border shut. They felt that Biden didn't do a good job with that Biden was letting too many people into the country illegally. Trump came in and through a series of policy measures and through simple deterrence, I think, managed to close down the border, or at least shut down the flow of immigrants coming in. And most polls show that Americans are happy with that. They didn't bargain, a lot of Americans, on the pictures and images that they've been seeing in the last number of months, sort of violence, not against gang members, not against, people eating our dogs and cats in Springfield, Ohio, who are occupying Aurora, Colorado, but against everyday people who might be here without authorization, but otherwise are not criminals. At least a third of the people who have been deported, according to statistics we've collected, don't have any criminal charges against them, don't have any criminal convictions against them. And I think that that's something different. And the polls show there's a different reaction to that, even among people who want tougher immigration policies.
So, Peter, I'm going to lean on you as kind of our unofficial historian here, because you've covered so many administrations. You've also been a foreign correspondent, bureau chief in Russia. When you're seeing what we're witnessing on the streets in Minneapolis, and again all over the country, but specifically what we've been witnessing recently in Minneapolis, the way that ICE is operating and the border agents are operating and the way the administration has been reacting, there are a lot of people who are saying, this is it. This is when the country starts to make its turn towards something that resembles more Moscow than it does the United States. What is your sense of it as somebody who's been steeped in this for so long?
Yeah, it does remind me of being a foreign correspondent, going to some of these countries around the world where, there are repressive government actions and street violence becomes, part of the storyline. Now, this is America. It's not Russia. We got to be careful about that. But, there are echoes here. And I think that that's something that a lot of Americans are concerned by. These are not police officers who are coming and executing search warrants in a calm and non-threatening way. These are people in military garb with masks on. That instills a certain image. And it's an image, by the way, that the president is happy to have instilled. Remember, the first pictures of some of these raids coming out were not taken by protesters. They were taken and disseminated by the Trump administration because they liked the images. They wanted to look tough. They want this to be seen as, a government cracking down in a sharp and visceral way. So they weren't shying away from these images. They were putting these images out. You saw the Secretary of Homeland Security, Kristi Noem, go to that prison in El Salvador and pose in front of all those people, in what is considered to be a very, very tough place for prisoners, and many of them had never been convicted of any crimes whatsoever. They wanted those images out there. And so I think that, that's something different. Every president I've covered, Republican or Democrat, I think would be concerned that these kind of images are tainting the image of the United States, not just at home, but abroad, sending a message to our allies and adversaries that goes contrary to the reputation that the United States has carefully, tried to cultivate over generations as a land of the free and home of the brave, and a place where there's a rule of law, and that we don't send armed troops into our streets. We don't send the military into our streets in a traditional way. There have been moments, obviously, when presidents have had to use the National Guard or even cited the Insurrection Act, but it was always in an exception, not as a regular thing. This seems to be becoming a regular thing.
So, David, as the guy that we're talking to today that works in the opinion department, I'm going to ask you this. MLK famously said the arc of the moral universe, he was trying to bend it toward justice. I mentioned it a moment ago. Are we still arcing towards justice?
I mean, look, the history of the United States is one that if you zoom out, that King statement is true. We're a lot better off in 2026 than we were in 1926, much less 1826. But at the same time, you see that American history is 4 steps forward, 3.9 steps back sometimes. And you go through periods of regression. So, for example, we went from Reconstruction, a period of promise, into decades of Jim Crow. So at no point in American history is it guaranteed that we're going to be progressing. Right now, we are absolutely in a period of regression. And the big question is, how long will it last and how much damage will it do?
All right, David French, well said. Thank you so much. Eleanor, really good to have you. And Peter Baker, appreciate it, guys.